Italy, early spring, 1945. As the sun slowly climbs over the tranquil waters of Lake Garda, in a villa surrounded by ancient cypresses, a man stands by the window, watching a world irrevocably collapsing. This is SS-Obergruppenführer Karl Wolff. He is no ordinary soldier. He is a man whose career was built on the absolute proximity to power. For years, he served as the right hand of Heinrich Himmler, the liaison officer who bridged the dark world of the SS with Hitler's high command. His boots never felt the mud of the Eastern Front, but his signature rests upon thousands of documents that sent souls into the abyss. He is the personification of the Nazi aristocrat. A flawlessly tailored gray uniform, silver insignia gleaming in the morning light, and a face that betrays not a single flicker of emotion. But behind this mask of a cold-blooded general hides the mind of a master opportunist. While his colleagues in Berlin speak of miracles and final victory from their bunkers, Wolff looks at the maps and sees only death. He realizes that the thousand-year Reich is bleeding at every border. His decision did not stem from a sudden awakening of conscience. It came from a cold, mathematical realization that the victors write history, and he, at any cost, intends to be among those alive to read it. In February 1945, the border between Italy and Switzerland was a place where desperation and hope collided. Under the cover of darkness, Wolff began the most dangerous dance of his career. Through Baron Luigi Perilli, an Italian aristocrat with deep ties to the intelligence underworld, he sent a signal that would echo in the hallways of Washington. That signal landed on the desk of Allen Dulles, the head of the American OSS in Bern. Dulles was a man who understood the shadows. He knew that wars are not won only with bullets, but with secret handshakes. When he heard that the Wolf, as they called him, offered negotiations, Dulles did not hesitate. Though he knew who he was dealing with, a man deeply entangled in the machinery of the Holocaust, the strategic benefit was too great to ignore. The German Army Group C in Italy had nearly 1 million soldiers under its command. If those soldiers retreated into an Alpine fortress, the war could drag on for another year, claiming millions of new victims. Dulles decided to open the door. Operation Sunrise was born. It was the beginning of a journey that would lead Wolff into Zurich, not as a conqueror, but as a fugitive in a high-priced civilian coat, hiding from the eyes of his own spies. The first meeting in Lugano was a scene worthy of the most tense espionage novel. Imagine a quiet Swiss restaurant, the aroma of freshly ground coffee, the soft clinking of silverware, while outside, the rain slowly washes the gray from the streets. At the table sit two men representing two worlds at war. Wolff, in a civilian suit that does not fit him as naturally as a uniform, and Dulles, slowly lighting his pipe, observing his counterpart with a mixture of disgust and fascination. Wolff did not come to ask for forgiveness. He came to trade. His stake was 1 million lives and the intact industrial plants of northern Italy. His price? Personal safety and a political role in Germany after the war. Dulles played the role of the cold diplomat, aware that every word from Wolff could be a trap. As they spoke, a large tactical military map of northern Italy lay on the table. Wolff's fingers traced the mountain passes, explaining where the German army could dig in and resist until the final breath. "I can order the surrender," he said calmly, "but I must have guarantees that I will not be handed over to the Soviets." It was the moment it became clear that they were not just negotiating peace, but laying the first foundations for the new war that would follow, the Cold War. Treason in the Third Reich was a luxury paid for with one's head. Rumors of Wolff's suspicious trips to Switzerland quickly reached Berlin, the very heart of the spider's web. Heinrich Himmler. Himmler, the man who created Wolff, summoned him for an urgent report at a time when Allied bombs had already turned much of Berlin into dust and ash. The atmosphere in Himmler's office was heavy, filled with the scent of ozone and fear. Wolff entered, aware that the Gestapo was waiting in the antechamber. He had to play the role of the ultimate manipulator. Looking his mentor directly in the eye, Wolff told a grand lie. He claimed the negotiations in Switzerland were not an act of surrender, but a brilliant plan to drive a wedge between the Americans and the Russians. He claimed he was using Dulles to open a rift in the Allied coalition. Himmler, whose own mind was already frayed by paranoia and despair, chose to believe him. Or perhaps, In his subconscious, he too was looking for an exit. He gave Wolff permission to continue, but with a warning. Any false move would mean death for him and his family. Wolff walked out of the office, cold sweat pouring down his back. He had just received permission to continue his double game, using the very structure of the Reich to tear it down. While the details of the capitulation were being secretly arranged, Operation Sunrise caused a seismic shift at the highest level of world politics. Joseph Stalin, through his vast network of informants, learned of the secret meetings in Switzerland. For the paranoid leader in Moscow, this was irrefutable proof of Western betrayal. Stalin was convinced that Roosevelt and Churchill were striking a separate peace with the Germans to allow the Wehrmacht to focus all its strength on the East against the Red Army. The letter Stalin sent to Roosevelt was brutal, accusatory, and full of bitterness. "My allies are working behind my back with the executioner," he wrote. Roosevelt, whose health in those weeks was critical, had to use his last ounces of strength to convince Stalin that these were strictly military matters, not a political alliance. Operation Sunrise, which was supposed to bring peace to Italy, nearly led to the collapse of the alliance that defeated Hitler. A shadow of suspicion fell over the relations of the great powers, a shadow that would define the history of Europe for the next 50 years. On the map of Europe, the front lines were moving, but in the offices of diplomats, new, invisible borders were being drawn. While Wolff played the political game, the actual power over the army rested in the hands of General Heinrich von Weidenhoff. He was the commander of Army Group C, a soldier of the old Prussian school who believed in honor and his oath. Wolff spent hours with him over weeks, slowly poisoning his mind with the truth about the situation in Germany. "Look at your soldiers, General," Wolff would say as they stood over military charts filled with red arrows marking the Allied advance. "They are dying for cities already lost, for a regime already dead." Weidenhoff was in agony. On one side was the oath to the Führer. On the other, the responsibility toward hundreds of thousands of young men under his command who were waiting for death. Wolff pressured him, warning that if they did not surrender now, Italy would become one giant ruin, and he would be remembered as its destroyer. Finally, in a moment of heavy silence, Weidenhoff yielded. He decided to send his emissaries to Caserta. It was the moment the professional soldier defeated the fanatical ideologue, risking a court-martial to save what remained of his army. April 29, 1945. The royal palace of Caserta, a masterpiece of Baroque architecture, became the stage for the final act of this drama. In a magnificent hall, beneath gold chandeliers, sat the Allied generals, while opposite them stood two German plenipotentiaries in dusty uniforms, Colonel von Schweinitz and SS Major Wenner. They had no official authorization from Berlin. Hitler was at that moment locked in his bunker, losing touch with reality. The atmosphere was sterile, devoid of any ceremony. When von Schweinitz picked up the fountain pen, only his heavy breathing could be heard in the room. The document he signed meant the unconditional surrender of all forces in Italy. It was the moment that theoretically stopped the war, but on the front, chaos still reigned. Radio links were poor, many commanders did not believe the news, and fanatical SS units refused to lay down their arms. Yet, the ink on that paper was stronger than any bullet. The clock began ticking toward a final peace, and the news spread slowly, like a wildfire, through the trenches and bunkers of the Apennines. But peace did not come without resistance. When Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, the supreme commander of the entire Southern Theater, learned of the signature in Caserta, he exploded with rage. He considered it an act of the worst treason. He immediately ordered the arrest of Wolff and Weidenhoff, branding them traitors to the fatherland. During the night of May 1st and 2nd, the headquarters in Bolzano became the scene of internal conflict. Wolff barricaded himself in his quarters, surrounded by an elite squad of SS men who remained loyal to him, while Kesselring's supporters surrounded the building. Barrels were aimed at brothers in uniform. Phone lines were burning. Wolff knew he had only hours to live if the situation did not calm. It was only when confirmation arrived that Hitler was dead that Kesselring, broken and exhausted, rescinded the order. He realized there was no one left to report to, and that any further fighting was merely suicide. That night, the last resistance of the German command in Italy collapsed, leaving space for the silence that followed years of thundering cannons. Operation Sunrise ended in success, but its actors did not meet the future they had imagined. Karl Wolff, the man who believed he would become a key player in a new Germany thanks to his cooperation with the Americans, quickly tasted the bitterness of reality. As soon as the war ended, Allied courts confronted his past. His merits in shortening the war in Italy saved his life, but they could not amnestiate him from his involvement in the death camps. He spent years in prison, remaining a controversial figure until the end of his life. To some, the savior of Italy; to others, a war criminal who escaped the gallows. Allen Dulles, using the lessons learned from this operation, built a career that would lead him to the head of the CIA, shaping the world through secret deals and shadow operations. Operation Sunrise remains recorded as the first act of the Cold War, a moment when the ideals of freedom had to compromise with the pragmatism of war, leaving historians to ask, is a peace achieved through betrayal worth less than one won through combat? Today, when a traveler passes through Italy, they see only the peaceful fields of Tuscany and the restored streets of Milan. The maps that were once covered with division markings and lines of attack are now only exhibits in museums. But deep in the archives, Operation Sunrise stands as a reminder of how thin the thread is that separates life from destruction. 1 million German soldiers surrendered, millions of Italian civilians were spared the horrors of street fighting, and cultural monuments were preserved. All of this thanks to one man who wanted to survive and another who wanted to win at any cost. Finally, only a large, old military map of Italy remains on the screen. The camera slowly pulls back, the sound of marching fades, and only silence remains. The war is over, but the stories of those who sold and bought it in the silence of Swiss rooms continue to live as a dark warning about the price of peace. May 2nd, 1945, German forces in Italy officially laid down their arms. It was the first major surrender of German forces in Europe, 5 days before the general surrender in Reims. Karl Wolff survived the war. Although charged with war crimes, his cooperation in Operation Sunrise remained a permanent point of contention between historians and jurists. He died in his bed, at an advanced age, in 1984. Allen Dulles utilized the network of German informants created during 1945 to lay the foundations of the American Central Intelligence Agency, CIA. Italy escaped the fate of scorched earth, which Hitler had ordered in his final days.